Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a run through of my Bruce Springsteen CD collection. So the boss starts in 1973 releasing his debut studio album. In all, he has released 21 studio albums, but in my CD collection, I've got 65 albums to run through with you guys. A little bit of everything from those studio albums to live albums, compilation, bootlegs, official live bootleg releases, box sets, all the way up to his most recent release, which is the expanded edition of Nebraska. This having just come out, a 5-disc box set. We're going to cover it all here in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with a run through of my Bruce Springsteen CD collection. So as I mentioned, Bruce kicks things off in 1973 with Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. And so this album here, it's really the beginning for Bruce. He doesn't yet have the E Street Band. He's finding his footings, but this one here, he's still starting to make some waves. And the same year, he releases The Wild, The Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. So 2 albums in 1 year, pretty cool. But as I said, really still kind of finding his footings. It would be the 3rd studio album from 1975, Born to Run. This one here being the one that would really kind of make him a household name and really start to introduce him to the world as a whole. And so this is where things for me start to verge a little bit, because I've been able to come across some really cool bootlegs. First one up is one that is just referred to as an expanded edition of the album. It takes everything from the album, but adds in all kinds of outtakes and things that weren't part of it, making you get an entirely different feel for the album. And I have a whole bunch of these things. I found this one label called Voodoo Records that did this. I've not found them or seen them doing this again for a long time. Popped up on eBay many years back, and I bought them when I had the opportunity, and I haven't seen them since. So don't ask me where to get them. I don't know, but perhaps you can still track some of these things down. I also found this one here, the Essential Born to Run Sessions, which has some of that stuff, but it also has some other stuff not part of that. And this just being the session stuff, so it doesn't have the actual tracks from the album mixed in. A little 2 different ways to hear this thing, but all in all, very cool. And then on top of that, I've also got the 30th anniversary edition, which was his sort of first foray into expanded albums. But this one here is a little bit different, where the first thing that's in here is a DVD, a concert DVD, which is Live at the Hammersmith Odeon in 1975. Disc 2 is a documentary called Wings for Wheels, The Making of Born to Run. And the last disc is a CD, and it's Born to Run Remastered. But not the typical kind of box set, especially with the fact that the actual album is the 3rd thing that's in here. It's not even the primary thing, it's the rest of the stuff. But all in all, very cool to get that. Now, as I mentioned with that box set, having that Live at Hammersmith Odeon, that was a DVD. Separately, they released the audio content, and I don't know why it wasn't part of it. They really could have fleshed out the box set so much more, having the audio also in there, but that's not how things were. Later on, Bruce would start to get it right on other box sets, but we do get this audio companion to that. And then Bruce returns with Darkness on the Edge of Town, which is my favorite of his early era albums. And again, where he really starts to explode and become that household name. This was released in 1978. And so like those other expanded edition albums, bootlegs that I was talking about, I have one for this one too, which is a double album. And so along with this double album, you might think that it is just the same as the stuff that's included in here. But there's actually quite a bit of difference between what's on here and the extra album content that is included inside this album here, which is where we get that double album promise in here. And for those albums that when he would do that stuff, he would actually go back into the studio and flesh things out, finish them, record additional vocal and guitar parts and whatever was needed, and finish that album off properly. But this that's here is just the sessions from that period. So the 2-disc set that's in here having a tremendous amount of stuff that was not found on this deluxe edition, which has all kinds of cool stuff that's in here along with DVDs and stuff. And very cool the way they did this, like a blue spiral bound notebook, and then all the discs and stuff were included inside that, giving a very interesting deluxe edition. And that's where I'm saying Bruce finally got things right, starting with that one there. So Bruce comes back in 1980 with The River, a double album. And you'd think that he must have used up all of his content doing that. But once again, I've got an expanded edition of it where it fleshes each of those albums out to double their length with a whole bunch of extra content on it. And so again, you might be thinking, well, hey, he did eventually put out a deluxe edition box set, which had a whole bunch of outtakes. And what's cool about this box set is that it also has a single disc edition of the album, because they were thinking about not putting it out as a double and putting it out as a single. But all those outtakes and things that are in here, some of those do appear here, but a lot of them don't. And so again, there's a bunch of bonus content on these that isn't here. And so I've actually really enjoyed. You would think that a number of those things would just repeat, and they haven't, which leads me to know and be able to definitively say that Bruce has so much more stuff in the vault from the stuff that we're already getting. You think he's scraping the bottom of the barrel with these? He is not. There's so much left in the vault. But all in all, these box sets and what he's been doing going forward with those has been very, very cool. So that leads us up to the 1982 album, where he makes a complete left field change of things, going from having had Born to Run, and then having Darkness on the Edge of Town, and having The River, each album getting bigger and bigger. And you would think he's just going to continue with that, but he doesn't. He does this instead, Nebraska. These are 4-track demo recordings that aren't anything like what he had already been putting out, actually leaning a bit more towards or back towards that debut album than anything else, yet it still goes on to sell 1 million copies. And I had this one, an expanded edition in the collection that adds in a bunch of outtakes that didn't make the album. And so I've known about these, but what I was a little bit bummed with is this did not have any of the Electric Nebraska, the songs that were recorded by the E Street Band. Well, we finally get that now, this having just dropped on October 24th, 2025. We get a 5-disc edition where we get all those outtakes. Then we get Electric Nebraska, 8 songs recorded with the E Street Band. And let me tell you, these 2 discs here are totally worth it alone for this price. But we also get a live 2025 rendition from the Count Basie Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey, where it's just Bruce with very minimal accompaniment that I think finally makes the album sound amazing. And a new 2025 remaster, again, where Bruce doing it upright, giving us all the cool stuff that he can from the archive. That said, like, I know there's more stuff in the archives that we will be getting down the road. I'll touch on a bit as I get to some of these other box sets where I can elaborate on that. So, of course, Bruce returns with the career-defining, career-changing album that is his biggest to date, Born in the USA. This thing has sold 17 million copies in the US. And not to be outdone by those other bootlegs, there is a 2-disc edition of Born in the USA, expanded, again, bootleg edition of this. So knowing that there was a ton of other stuff like that out there. And then there's one that is 2 discs of just outtakes. So whereas this one here, again, works the full album in plus all of the outtakes that didn't make the album, then we get this that is just outtakes of stuff like that, having tracks on here that didn't make the album, plus things that would turn up as the B-sides. So this one's kind of a cool thing here, where we get the album, then we get the B-side. So if you just wanted to hear it in that manner, and then we get a whole bunch of outtakes from it, as well as some additional solo recordings of things that make for a very interesting release. And there's probably other types of bootlegs that are out there that do these same sort of things. So even if you can't find the ones that I was talking about called Voodoo Records, that's the label that was doing these, or even this one, which was by Moonchild Records, there's plenty of other ones out there, I'm quite sure, that have the same recordings that you could get of the same quality. So now the first box set that Bruce does, and I've got a slimmed line down version of this. It's live 75 to 85, a 3-disc live album chronicling his whole career over that decade. And this has a number of recordings on here that didn't make the album. So if you were a diehard fan at that time and you were getting it, you were getting some new Bruce Springsteen as well. And so this was really the first time that Bruce had done any kind of box set, and actually one of the very first box sets made available that hugely sold very well for Bruce at the time, and kind of started the trend of making box sets that would become such a big thing in the 90s and beyond. We're then moving on to Tunnel of Love, 1987. This one was a much more introspective album. Again, very different than Born in the USA. It did well. I think any album following Born in the USA was going to do well. Not one of my favorites, but still very good. And again, an expanded edition by that Voodoo Records, where they take the whole album and flesh in a bunch of stuff. And getting to hear those outtakes that didn't make the album, always a cool thing. Bruce would release an EP called Chimes of Freedom. Don't know if this is the first EP, but it's one of the only EPs I've got in my collection from him that has 4 live recordings. This has Tougher Than the Rest live, Be True, Chimes of Freedom, and then Born to Run live acoustic. Perhaps this is, I'm just actually checking now. No, I was going to say, so this here is 1986. So unless this was from that, I don't know. But in terms of the release of these things, this is 1987. And actually, when I looked it up in the Wikipedia, they say the date's 88. So I'm not entirely sure. I was going off Wikipedia as 87, or I'm not actually going off Wikipedia. I'm going off the back of the album that says 1987. But Wikipedia says it came out in August 1988. So don't know if that's one of those things where the album was held back and copyrighted in 87, but didn't come out for 8 months later. Who knows? I'm sure one of you guys out there can probably tell me and clarify that. So Bruce would take a bit of a break and go into the studio and work on an album that was called Human Touch. And when this one was done, it took longer to complete than he thought, and he was already kind of moving on from it. And before he handed this in, he went back in to record one additional track and ended up making an entire album and decided to release both. So Lucky Town and Human Touch come out on the same day. And what's better than getting 2 albums from Bruce on the same day? Not much, in my opinion. But we can get even more of that with those bootlegs, because there is a 20-track edition of Human Touch. And again, you might think, well, aren't those just the songs from Lucky Town? No, there's a 20-track edition of that. So this was a 10-track album that has 10 more songs on it that didn't make the cut. And this album here, which did have more songs on it, it had 14, so 6 additional songs included. And it's got cool songs. So songs like, let's see, what was it? Part Man, Part Monkey, that became a B-side. That's the third track that's on here now. But all in all, very cool to get those things. I know I keep saying it, but when I found those and I was getting all that extra Bruce Springsteen, I was just beside myself, much the same way I am with all these other things that are coming down the road and deluxe editions and stuff like that. I've been a big fan of Bruce for a very long time, since I was a kid in the 80s, and I just keep eating it up. Here's something that only initially came out, I think, for European markets, but was Bruce in concert, and it was listed as unplugged with the un crossed out, so that it was just Bruce plugged. And unplugged was a really big thing at that time, and Bruce was sort of bucking the system, saying, okay, I'm going to come on MTV, but I want to plug in and rock. And that was a unique thing. Everybody was doing unplugged, so I loved it. Looking back at it now, I actually think Bruce should have done unplugged. And he could have done this too, but I think if he had done unplugged, he may have had a huge album on his hand, the same way that a lot of other people that did the unplugged ended up having some of the biggest albums of their career turned out to be those MTV unplugged releases. But this came out having a few songs on here that didn't make the album, so this was a very cool one. One of the ones that was off of here was, which one is it? Redheaded Woman, the song that it opens with, a very cool song that was glad to get that as part of it. So that was a lot of fun to get that at the time and get a few extra tracks that weren't on the albums, and done a little bit differently too. All right, so Bruce, as we know, is recording other albums, as will be case in point when I show you guys the tracks too, because there's a lot of albums that were recorded in the 90s era that didn't come out. And instead, Bruce takes a left turn and decides to do greatest hits and record 4 new songs on it with the E Street Band, getting them back together for this. And then that took on a life of its own, and they were going to make an album together, but it just didn't turn out to be that. But the chronicling of that became a documentary, and with the VHS tape at the time, you got a 5-track EP called Blood Brothers. And so you get an alternate take of Blood Brothers. You get the song High Hopes, which would later be re-recorded for the album High Hopes. Murder Incorporated, which was live at Tramps, and that was the music video version. Secret Garden with Strings, which would be added to the CD single of it at the time, and a song called Without You. So all stuff above and beyond what was on here, because the 4 songs that were on here was Secret Garden, regular without the strings, Murder Incorporated, Studio, Blood Brothers, and This Hard Land. So you got 5 additional tracks. Very cool for that as well. But we also get this expanded edition, a 2 CD version of tracks that were recorded for them putting this together here. So there was so much more stuff. They could have made an entire album and dropped it, but they didn't. Instead, we got 4 tracks there. We got the 5 songs that were here. Those are gathered up on this, plus fleshed out, plus a whole bunch of live renditions of that stuff as well. On that, again, a Voodoo Records album. So what we do get instead of an E Street Band album is Ghost of Tom Jode in 1995. Back to Bruce doing a more introspective thing. First time he had done anything like this since Nebraska, but this one properly recorded. So very introspective and acoustic, and not a lot of accompaniment, but professionally recorded, not demos. And again, we get the last of these sort of bootleg style expanded edition albums, but we get one from Ghost of Tom Jode expanded out to 19 tracks, getting to hear some of that other stuff that Bruce was working on in the studio at that time. Now, again, as I said, that Bruce is now digging through archives and he's recording these other albums and things. But the E Street Band, it's picking up steam, and he decides to put out the box set tracks. the first tracks, because we later get a tracks 2. And this is 4 discs of unreleased material, everything that was on here. And so it had a lot of different B-sides. It had the song Part Man, Part Monkey that I mentioned, that turned up on here. We also get Born in the USA, but we get an outtake version from Nebraska on here. And we just get a lot of other cool stuff. And again, when I got this, I was absolutely loving that thing. And they would put out, I don't know if it was like about a year later, because I think that was 98. In 99, we got the 18 tracks, a selections of. Not sure why they waited a year to do it, but they did. Cool thing was, when they put this out, they added 3 more songs to this that weren't on the box set. So you get, I don't know if it's, let me just check this real quick. So Brothers Under the Bridge is listed here. We get The Fever and The Promise, but maybe it's a version of something else that was on here, because it does say, includes 3 never before released bonus tracks. The Fever, The Promise, and Trouble River. That's what it was, track 15. And then they still have Brothers Under the Bridge, which was the final track from here. But Trouble River, The Fever, and The Promise added to this. And The Promise, of course, would later turn up on the album of the same name when Bruce put out The Darkness on the Edge of Town. So kind of cool how some of this stuff all comes full circle, but this in and of itself is just an alternate sort of greatest hits. It's a very cool thing because we get an alternate version of the song Growing Up from the debut album, leading all the way up to where he was at that time. So up to about 1995 when this was coming out in 1999. It was sort of the latest thing. So now this is listed as 2000, and I can't honestly remember what it was part of. I think it came along with a DVD, but we get, it was promotional only, and it's 2 live tracks. We get My Hometown and This Hard Land, and it came out in 2000. And following that, we're getting Live in New York. And this was pretty cool because this was the reunited E Street Band, and it had 2 new recordings on it at the time, Land of Hope and Dreams and American Skin 41 Shots, both of which would later get new versions, studio versions, many years down the road. I think it's on the Hope and Dreams album. Did I get that right? High Hopes. Sorry, I think it's on the High Hopes album, but I'll clarify when I get to it. So just in classic, typical Bruce fashion, there's a little something bonus on here, not just live renditions, but some new tracks, and always appreciative of the way that he thinks of his fans when doing stuff like that. But finally, at this point, we get The Rising in 2002, a brand new E Street Band album. There hadn't been one for quite some time, going back to Tunnel of Love in 87, a full-length album at least. And this one was, again, in typical Bruce fashion, something very different. We had I don't know if it's violin or fiddle. I know there's a subtle difference between there. I think it's violinist Susie Tyrell come in as an E Street Band member, giving a very different vibe to this album as opposed to it just sounding like a ruckus sort of E Street Band album. But it was perfect for the time, and this album itself would go on, I think, to sell 2 million copies and really reinvigorate Bruce's career going forward. Following that, we get the Essential Bruce Springsteen, and it was just the regular version, a 2-disc set, and that might be cool in and of itself. It was the first time we were getting a double album compilation of his material, but this version of it, and I think it was a Best Buy exclusive, had a 3rd bonus disc of 12 unreleased tracks on it that weren't on albums. And so I bought it solely to get that, and that having the stuff that it had on it. Again, I was just listening to that over and over like it was a new Bruce Springsteen album when it came out. And yet Bruce comes back and he essentially makes, like he has Nebraska and then Ghost of Tom Jode, he does Devils in Dust, a very sparse acoustic style album that's very introspective, and it's now kind of becoming a normal thing that Bruce does this, that he changes things up and he moves between doing E Street Band albums and doing true solo albums. This one here came with a DVD that had 5 live performances, and this was at the time one of the dual discs. I don't think they even make these kind of things anymore. One side's a CD, one side was a DVD, and you could pop it in, and that's they use these slightly different cases to signify the difference between it, but I bought the deluxe edition in order to get that. And so Bruce would come back making another left field turn and never really got into this disc. This is We Shall Overcome, the Pete Seeger sessions. I would later buy this version of it, which was an expanded or deluxe edition of it, which had 5 bonus tracks on it, and it would have a DVD included as well. And I sort of felt like, well, if I'm gonna buy it, even though I don't care for the songs themselves, let me get it for the collection. And I want to say it was $3.99 and it was sealed. Found it used somewhere for that, so I added it to the collection. But it's Bruce doing the Pete Seeger songs, the folk songs, which is very much what Bruce is all about and from the heartland. And it makes total sense. And at that time, it was a very popular thing. Rod Stewart was having success with his American Songbook. Other people were having success making like blues albums. Well, he did the folk album, and he did have good success with it, and totally wrote it for quite some time, doing a live album from it as well. Finally, Bruce would return with Magic. This album here, 2007, was what I had been waiting for some time from Bruce, getting this, because remember, we had gotten Ghost of Tom Jode, then we got the E Street album, but it wasn't full on rockin' E Street. Then we get a Devils and Dust, another acoustic album. Then we get Pete Seeger. So a good decade on, we finally get the E Street Band rockin' here, kicking off with the song Radio Nowhere, which I literally think is one of the best Bruce Springsteen songs he ever recorded. I still love it to this day. This album, one of my favorites. He returned with Working on a Dream in 2009. This one here being a deluxe edition, having a DVD with it, a documentary, but also having a bonus song, The Wrestler, included on it. And then at this point, he releases standalone, The Lost Sessions for Darkness on the Edge of Town, The Promise, and that was that same album that was included in here, but it gets a standalone release. Now, his other ones have not gotten it, from like The River and some of the other projects that he's done. I'm going to touch again on that a little bit later with some albums that have been released. But for this one here, he did choose to release it as a standalone release later on, so you can get that album done that way, standalone. And I just decided I wanted it in the collection as a standalone release, so I bought it like that. Next up, he does Wrecking Ball, and Wrecking Ball was 2012. And this is where he starts digging back into his catalog of songs. And so we're getting songs like Land and Hope of Dreams on here, new studio versions of those, even though they're older songs in the catalog. He's dusting things off and basically clearing out the vaults with songs that he probably should have released but never did. So we get that. And then I think this being a European best of, but it is the best of that he has. Collection 1973 to 2012. It is a single disc collection, and it spans from his debut all the way through to Wrecking Ball, including having that song that I love so much, Radio Nowhere, on here. But this one here, picking up and doing that, it's just a really fantastic collection. Some other collections I'm going to show you in a bit. I've talked about when those came out, and I still go back and say this is the best one. That if you're going to track down any single disc Bruce Springsteen collection, do this one, simply called Collection 73 to 2012. That's the way to do it. It is on Sony Music. All All right, so Bruce starts releasing official bootlegs himself. These are the ones that are ripped right from the shows, and you can order them and get them. There's not a lot in the packaging of these things. They just get these stickers put on, and they are specific to the shows. So this one was the Apollo Theater, March 9th, 2012, 2-disc set. I found this one is a used one, so I picked it up. I haven't picked them all up, but there's tons of them. I mean, you could have 100+ CD Bruce Springsteen collection if you just bought all the live shows that he has released. So Bruce comes back with high hopes. And this one's here really getting in with pulling things from the archives and completing them off. We get that song American Skin 41 Shots on here. We get the song High Hopes added to this on here, as well as a number of other ones. We even get a new electric rendition of The Ghost of Tom Jode, which I think is the absolute pinnacle version of it out there. But what I love about this more than anything is that he has Tom Morello guesting on 7 of the tracks. He is the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine. Not a typical guitar person that you would expect to be playing with the E Street Band, but he brought him in, deputized him, and they did a tour together. And then he decided to record these songs and have them play on the album. And it gives the album a very different feel having them on here. He didn't come back and continue with the E Street Band, but I always loved what he brought to the table as far as this was concerned. And Rage Against the Machine had done their own version of Ghost of Tom Jode, and I'm quite sure that's why Bruce decided to record an electric version, letting Tom Morello absolutely rip on the guitar, which he does. If you've never checked out the electric version of it from this album, do give it a listen. It is so, so very good. All right, so I did have one more of these bootleg type things in the collection, and it was this for American Beauty, a 4-song EP that was a digital release only. And it's got 4 tracks on it: the song American Beauty, Mary Mary, Hurry Up Sundown, and Hey Blue Eyes. And I believe these are all songs that were perhaps outtakes from the album Magic. I can't quite remember where they come from or what they were. I could be wrong. But finally getting, seeing the light of day just as a 4-track digital release. And I managed to find a bootleg, essentially, made to look just like a Columbia Records release and everything, CD, because I love my CD copies of things. So I do have a physical version of it, but it's not official. Music's official, just not the press of it. And I have another one of the official bootlegs that he would release. This one here, which is Albany, New York, May 13th, 2014. Another double live album. Again, same package as those other ones, because these are ones that are just ripped and burned right after the shows. You can go on order. Don't know if he's still doing that for all his shows or not, but you can get those sort of things if you go on his website and order them. So one of those other compilations that came out was called Chapter and Verse. And this one is an interesting one because it goes way back before his 1973 debut album, where he was with a band called the Castillos. And then after that, he had a band called Steel Mill. And then he has the Bruce Springsteen Band before he is just Bruce Springsteen. And so we get tracks from those different iterations of Bruce all the way up through Wrecking Ball. And this was released as part of a book that he put out, autobiography, where this music was supposed to be sort of the soundtrack to the book. So I picked it up to hear that stuff, but the music is just not Bruce Springsteen that we know. So those first 4 tracks that are on here, not really something I'm going to listen to very often, but it's cool to get those. And so Bruce goes and does something completely different, but this is after, maybe kind of during the pandemic, but Broadway has shut down in New York. Theaters are not making their money, having a hard time making rent. And so Bruce says, you know what, I can help out. I'm going to go do a show on Broadway and fill the theaters so that even if they can't do the shows because of social distancing and all of that, he can do that. And so he did Bruce Springsteen on Broadway. and recorded those shows and then put this out. And he tells stories between the songs, and he does these acoustic renditions of things. And it was very, very cool to hear all of that. It's not something, again, that I think I would listen to all that often, but I remember watching it at the time. In fact, the video of it was the most interesting aspect. The soundtrack part, not so much, but the storytelling and then getting to hear those songs after you hear the stories. Bruce is an amazing storyteller. Obviously, we know that from his lyrics, but getting to hear the stories before the songs are performed was also very cool. And so Bruce makes a bit of a left turn, essentially making a country album with his next one, Western Stars, which came out in 2019. And to go along with this, he makes a film about it and releases this soundtrack because all the songs were performed live in this version of the film. I don't know if it's because he chose not to tour it or what it was. So it's still the same songs. There's not a lot different between it. I would just go for this all the time. But there is a live rendition of it recorded in his barn where you get to check those tracks out too. So again, a lot of fun. One of my all-time favorite Bruce Springsteen albums is the last album of original material that he did called Letter to You. And this is one where Bruce sings about the aging rocker, that he's one of the last of the musicians that he first played with in the Castillos. And the songs that are in here, some of these, again, dusted off. Janie Needs a Shooter is an older song that he dusted off and finally recorded a version of here. But this album is just so good. Everything about it is just phenomenal. And it was really great to get this at the time that it came out. Just a very sort of fitting album. There's a documentary about it. And he's been doing that a lot lately, putting out documentaries along with each album. And it just makes the album have such a greater impact with each of those. And so then Bruce would do a covers album called Only the Strong Survive. And these are R&B songs, standard songs that he grew up with, where he really wanted to push himself vocally. So he did these. And while I know a lot of people who actually really like this album, it just didn't click with me. I'm not a fan of the R&B and soul songs or the original standards. And so hearing Bruce do it, I like hearing his voice, but I don't really care for the music on it. So for me, not so interested in it. And it is listed as volume 1. It was talked about that we were supposed to get volume 2 right after it, as much as or like 6 months thereafter. But that didn't happen. And I don't know if that's just because the album didn't sell, but he's since moved on to doing other things, in particular putting out the massive Tracks to the Lost albums, 7 lost studio albums in this thing. It is just a massive box set that's in here. We get the LA Garage Sessions 83. We get Streets of Philadelphia Sessions, which is my favorite album in here. I always love the song Streets of Philadelphia and wish there'd been a whole album worth of that. And it turns out there was. Then there's Faithless, Somewhere North of Nashville, Inyo, Twilight Hours, and then Perfect World is just songs that he had earmarked for a future album, but they never got gathered up. And so he did for this here, making a sort of more holistic overall album of what you might expect. So we got that this year, as well as Nebraska 82 this year. 2 killer box sets this year. I can't believe it. And there's also selections from the Lost albums, 20 tracks from the box set of those 7 unreleased albums, pulling 2 or 3 tracks a piece for it. So there you go. In all, with all of that, counting the 7 albums in that box set, is the 65 albums that I have in my Bruce Springsteen collection. But you know, as you can see, there's so much more, and there's so much other stuff that could be as part of this, other live albums and things of that nature, and other probably compilations and what is out there. But this is what I needed in my collection. Weigh in. What is your favorite Bruce Springsteen album or favorite thing that you've got in yours that you really, really love? The way that I love those bootlegs that have all those extra outtake tracks that haven't been released, because I love getting all that rare Bruce Springsteen material. So for me, at least, that's some of my favorite stuff, including this most recent Nebraska 82. I'm absolutely enjoying it. I have done a full review for it. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.